All right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have Vivienne Aerts. Vivienne is a Dutch, New York-based vocalist, conductor, and composer with a focus on electronics, chocolate, and multi-sensory experience design, who can be found in a plethora of different projects. She's got band ensembles, duo acts, solo acts, ones that involve looping, a cappella acts, and even one where you can eat the music. Vivienne and her husband Ted happens to be a pastry chef, do an improv performance, which is Vivienne makes a soundscape and Ted will paint an edible picture out of chocolate to the soundscape. And at the end of it, everyone gets to eat this painting. That's so cool. There's nothing like that. And that's what we're looking for. We're always looking to be shown a completely new direction. And that's what Vivienne and her work does. She also has a new album out called Typuhthâng, and it takes the idea of edible music to the next level. Typuhthâng is Vivienne with 100 next-generation female musicians in collaboration with Original Beans Chocolate. Typuhthâng aims to empower the female cacao workers of Virunga State Park in the Congo, which is already so cool, right? So how this works is, or how this worked, is this whole album is female musicians. And to take it to the next step with the type of improv performance Vivienne's already doing, she paired up with Original Bean, which is an all-female farmer cacao plant. So with every physical copy of the record, you get a bar of Original Bean chocolate, which in turn is supporting beyond fair trade rates these female cacao farmers and a whole ensemble of female musicians. Like, this is a super inspiring endeavor. And Vivienne matches this endeavor. Our conversation was very, very inspiring and uplifting. Not only is she involved in these performance endeavors, but she's also a teacher. And she's one of the only teachers in Effortless Mastery, a course that is available through Berkeley, based on Kenny Werner's book, Effortless Mastery, in the world. So there's two people that teaches this practice, her and Kenny. So this conversation kind of flows in between ideas of effortless mastery, her history, and the new album Typuhthâng. And it's a very, very inspiring conversation. And I'm super excited to be able to share it with you guys. But before we do that, there's a couple things. One, we got to hear a track from the record. This is The Way You Touched My Hand, off Typuhthâng, Vivienne Aerts. The Way You Touched My Hand, Vivienne Aerts. The album is Typuhthâng, available now on all streaming platforms. But I recommend you go to Vivienne's website or Vivienne's Bandcamp and order a physical copy so you can get the chocolate bar that goes with and support the cause. Now, that track in particular was a little more experimental than everything else on the record, but we spent a bit of time talking about it. So that's why I wanted to share that one. Also, it's one of my favorites. A few more things to plug. I play in a band called C Level, letter C dash Level. We are a funk punk reggae rock group out of Cleveland, Ohio. We take 12-string acoustic guitars and run them through amplifiers as well as other various strung instruments. We have a couple shows coming up, one of which is at the West Side Bowl in Youngstown, Ohio with the Bumping Uglies. So if you hear this interview and you're like, I can dig this guy's banter, maybe he's got some music worthwhile, check out c-level44.com. If you're in Youngstown, Ohio, we're playing with the Bumping Uglies July 14th, and we're playing outside the Rock Hall in Cleveland, Ohio, August 17th. Anywho, this also is a kind of a step conversation into another interview with Kenny Werner, diving into effortless mastery. So if you want to dive deeper into the effortless mastery mindset, or if you're inspired by what Vivienne says, like I was during this conversation, you might want to check out that interview as well. That one will be coming out in a few weeks. Anywho, last thing, if you like this podcast and you dig it, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast in any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Vivienne and sharing their insight with you. So without further ado, this is my conversation, my very inspired conversation with Vivienne Aerts. To get into it, I wanted to ask you about mindful improvisation.
Right. Well, I have a background in psychology and in music. So I grew up in the Netherlands in a place called Leiden, which is half an hour south of Amsterdam, and it has a big university. So in 2004. Well, right. I went to study psychology in Leiden at the university. I did my bachelor, my master, and at the same time, all these years, I studied at the conservatory for first singing, and then I graduated. I focused on choir conducting. So in the daytime, I was a therapist, and in the evenings, I was working with 5 choirs as a piano player and conductor, because most often, you're doing both because there's not always a band available. So I was the conductor and leader, and I was arranging a lot. And 5 choirs. So that was all different ones. There was a Dutch choir and a jazz choir. There was a sailor choir. I had a children's choir, and I had a psychiatric patient choir at this local institution. And I was doing a lot of jazz, but with these choirs, it was all different genres, obviously. And I worked, in the daytime, I was just doing regular therapy with different people with different problems in a private practice. And it was not, and in the weekends, I would just perform with my band, with my own original songs. And I did that for a couple of years, and I was very interested in the combination of my 2 professions. But first, I went to Berkeley because I figured, well, I want to learn more and focus more on my voice and on composition. And I had years before that, before I graduated, I won a scholarship from Berkeley. So when I finally finished my studies and was already working a bit, I just hit Berkeley up. I'm like, hey, can I still come? And they say, yes, you should totally come. So it was all paid for. I got a Fulbright and got some private funding because I told people to buy my album. My 3rd album just came out, but I told people to buy my 2nd album, and I sold a bunch of them to just, help me go to Berkeley. It was before Kickstarter and all that was like a thing, especially in the Netherlands. That trickled through just later. But I was able to just do that. And so in 2012, I went to Berkeley, and I was already with my vocal groups and the people I would teach. I would always discuss circle song exercises to get them out of their mind into their body. And what you always find is then if you would improvise with a group vocally, there's a lot of people that think they need to do it well. Right. There's a lot of mental blocks like, oh, I need to improvise. And, as a jazz singer by then and conductor, I was very used to improvise. And I knew, you learn so much. And I was helping these amateur people just for their hobby to just get it out of their head into their body. Any sound is a sound. And if you do collective improvisation, then instead of mindful, it could be mindless, which is even better. So by now I would maybe even change the term, but, it resonates. So I came up with that, and I'm sure there's other people that, use these terms. It's not an official, but I created that. I did a bunch of workshops with all these different exercises before I went to Berkeley. And then funny enough, during Berkeley, I was focusing on super jazz, and I got into this honors program in 2012. So that's been a while, but I got to work with Joe Lovano, Dave Liebman, Patitucci, and Danilo Perez in the Global Jazz Program. I don't know if you heard about that, but Berkeley has this special bubble where the jazz nerds go. And I was the only singer at that time in my year. And by now, everything's bigger. At that time, there was no master's program. There was just undergrad. By now, they have a master's. So during my last semester, I meet Kenny Werner, and he's teaching about this book he wrote 28 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. And Effortless Mastery, that's this book. It talks about how to let the music play itself, how to just let go of this need to sound good and that stuff that gets into your mind, things like I'm not good enough, or what do they think about me, and being frustrated about stuff you don't know yet. which is in a way ridiculous, but still we do it.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I don't, I suck. All these little voices that you could experience that don't facilitate your growth, right? Because if it would help to punish yourself, we would recommend it. So I met him during my last semester, and he was there as the artistic director of the Performance Wellness Institute. And it was my last semester, his first semester. He didn't really have classes yet. It was just all open space. And Berkeley hired him to be the director of this Berkeley Wellness Institute, which basically was a meetup group for the teachers from yoga and body mapping, to just talk about wellness in the school. So after a while, during that my last semester, I was like, Kenny, where's everybody? So I started a mailing list within Berkeley, and I grew the institute with him over the last 10 years. Now we have, obviously it changed its name to Berkeley Effortless Mastery Institute after his book. And we're still meeting with yoga and body mapping teachers and Alexander Technique. We even have Tai Chi, so they can take a minor in this stuff. But when I met him, I was like, wow, this is a blend of what I do. This is the key for delivering people that study music, right? Delivering artists in the world that are themselves, that love what they do, and they could make a change from within. With Global Jazz, we were doing community service and like healing the world outside in. But with Effortless Mastery Institute, we are changing the world inside out, because if we feel better, we're going to be better people. We're able to just make a change. So that became my thing. And I've been growing that institute since the very beginning of it, seeing all his classes. And after a while, these teachings that are in the book are now basically a method. And this method, I'm the first official certified teacher, because I was just hanging in there for so many years. And we needed to expand the classes. So in order to create more sections, they find me instead of hiring me as a vocal teacher or a piano teacher, they decided to hire me as an official Effortless Mastery teacher. And we have now 95 students per this semester. And then next semester, again, we're expanding our sections. So we're growing a lot. Berkeley's big. We have 7,000 students.
Wow.
It's a factory.
Oh, man.
Studios. It's like Walt Disney for music. Everything is here.
That's fascinating. I get overwhelmed with 70 kids. Jeez. But so that's really interesting that you're on your own journey of the kind of effortless mastery sort. Like with this, like, so what were some of the exercises that you were running with these choirs? Because each one you said is a vastly different set of maturity. And like kind of like in some cases knowing, like with the psychiatric unit, like I don't know what that looked like. I went to CSU, Cleveland State, for music therapy, so I had to run a couple groups like that, and like in those similar sounding like
right. I'm sure
populations, but like there is that thing where like you really bring down what the guard of what's socially accepted as good. Okay, sorry, I'm getting off topic. My question is, did those methods that you developed with your choirs that became mindful improv kind of overlap with the effortless mastery exercises that Kenny kind of uses during that, at least from that first book?
Well, I would say everything is basically the same, though.
Okay.
Right? How do people let go of their thoughts? They feel their body. That means they have to be in the moment. Kenny calls that the space. What Kenny is doing is basically cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't call it like that, but we're reconditioning ourselves to first love what we do and who we are as just a better, it might not be true, but who cares? It's a better starting point than hating yourself.
Right.
So that's layer one, right? You want to peel back the layers of like all the thoughts. What if that lives in the future? And the thoughts of, oh, I could have done, or that's all in the past, regretting the past and being anxious about the future. You want to be in the moment. How do you get to the moment? Everybody is in agreement pretty much that you take a breath. Because if you take a breath, and that's not new about Kenny's method. The new thing basically about what Kenny's doing is that he even cuts it down to a simple exercise that's even shorter than anybody would. You can go meditate, and then for 45 minutes you're sitting in a lotus and you feel like you're flying, or you might be annoyed that it's not really working for you, but imagine it works. Or you go yoga, or you go running, and you're like super chill, right? You get back to your instrument, you're stressed again. That's the innovation. You do music therapy at yourself on your instrument. You need to touch the instrument. You need to reestablish a neutral connection without any care, without any responsibility or any expectations. You need to reestablish that.
Yeah, that's, and I think that's what's so
powerful. So there's no newness about that, right? Because we all agree on that philosophy. Eckhart Tolle is saying it. Wim Hof, this Iceman, right? He's saying that. All of them, the Buddhists, the yoga, they all say you have to be in the moment. You have to let go of the thought. Blah, blah, blah. It's all the same. The question is, how do you make that cool philosophy a practice? So I don't see any differences to that. For me, it's just a blend of all these philosophies. And in Kenny's way, we've divided in 4 steps, as you've probably read in the book. There's step 1 and 2 about finding that moment, finding that space and touching the instrument. Where in step 1, you find a space of no thoughts or of being in a moment. You take that breath and you play 1 note. When your mind is like, oh, which note? That's not the space, right? You care and you don't care. So that's a journey. That's reconditioning your ego, thus your mind, to stay out of the way. So step 1 is touching the instrument and playing 1 note. Step 2 is playing multiple notes, staying in that space, prolonging the time without the desire of staying in the space, because that could create an whole other circle, right? I need to do effortless mastery. Well, then you're going to suck at it, because that creates a mind fuck either. Yeah. Sorry. So, and then step 3 and 4 is obviously the most asked question about this book. Well, if I'm so happy with everything I do, why would I ever improve, right?
Yeah.
You can be inspired and curious and happy with yourself, because there, at some point, if you let go of like the need to sound good and all these depressive thoughts, if you let go of that, you're in the moment and you're like, yeah, what I do is the music became what I do, right? You become the instrument that plays the instrument. And then there's basically stuff you know and can do, and there's stuff that you don't know yet. And that's merely a choice. So step 3 and 4 are about finding out what you know and not know, and then loving yourself for it. And then being open to that new information. In step 4, you zoom in so deeply, not until you could do it, but until it plays itself. So in a way, it's structured 2 ways, right? Find a space, and then with that space, you learn new information. But obviously, because, that's easily explained, it's a process. It's a thing you do every day, like brushing your teeth. You add it to your life, and you, as he says, you practice things for the effect it has on your playing. You're like a river, you carve a path. And that river from a little creek becomes a big, big, wide water over the years. So, and what our ego doesn't allow us to admit is that when learning something so deeply that it plays itself, it has a collateral effect on everything we do. Because your ego might say, oh, this is just 1 bar. This is just one. Oh, I'm still not famous, right? It's just a couple of chords. No, you would later find out through the process that studying something so deeply will create stuff in your brain that will just trickle into everything you do as your other playing, right? If you practice just a chord, ba, ba, with your left hand vibe, right? Po, ba, on one and on two and, ba, ba. And you do that so deeply, and you're staying in the space, and nothing in your body is just resisting it. And your body is doing it, not your mind controlling your hands. No, your body is doing it. That's motoric skill. That's muscle memory. Then no performance anxiety can beat that. Nothing can come, if there's a famous person or a journalist in your audience, you could still do ba, pop, because it's playing itself. You can have hiccups. You're not, all the stuff we do without our mind involved. We sneeze, you're not like left foot, right foot, left. No, you're just walking. Stuff happens by itself. You want to play music from that place, that it plays itself. So that's it's a whole process in that sense. That takes, in Berkeley, we have like 30 weeks. It's 2 semesters. And so it's a heavy course. They meet now 4 hours a week doing that. So it's really a mental process. But basically, I've been doing different exercises for distracting your mind and making sure that you're back to your breathing. These exercises I came up with myself, right? There's a gazillion of ways to distract your mind from caring.
Wow. So thinking all that makes complete, just like you said, makes complete sense. And
right.
It's, I get it really, thinking of it as kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, but in the positive sense,
totally good brainwash.
Yeah.
Wash your brain from the bad stuff.
Yeah, I love it.
That's the Kenny's words.
But
we all need it. Yeah.
So kind of studying all this on your own, coming from this very clinical background of psychology, did you find that kind of hindered the letting go because you were kind of aware of it in a way, or did it make it easier because you're like, oh, it's neuroplasticity. If I keep doing it, I'm going to make new pathways. It's going to be, you know what I mean? Kind of believing the method. No? Okay.
Well, it's nice to know all these things, but if I work with a person with a burnout or a person with anxiety, then I'm not it's never going to help for me to open a book and say, oh, you have this.
Yeah.
Right. So I've been always very intuitive with my methods and see what works for the person. And thank God I worked in a private practice where that was possible.
Right.
We could do a lot of different things and just check in with the client and see, oh, how about this? I did even drawing. They had to draw a tree, I remember at some point. And then we would talk about the tree they draw. And I remember one client, we just tell, oh, can you draw? They have to draw a couple things, but one of them was a tree. And this client draw a tree that was cut half. And then in center of this tree was a little twig coming out. I mean, that's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. And I didn't tell him what to draw. I just told him to draw a tree. He could have drawn the one on, I'm looking at right now. Could be any tree. So that makes for, first of all, good conversation. Right. Yeah. I was lucky in a private practice. It was a little chaotic because of we could do
the structure of the private practice is usually.
But I'm okay with wearing multiple hats and doing a lot of as you probably know. By now I work at Berkeley. I worked inside of Berkeley with Kenny, but also outside of Berkeley with Kenny. That's my education hat. And then I work for myself as a musician. I just released my 3rd album. And then with my husband, we create multi-sensory performance art. So I love wearing a lot of, my husband is a pastry chef. So there's a lot of chocolate in our life. And we do a lot of experiments and creating spontaneous artworks. And that's in line with the effortless mastery method, right? You want to be okay with whatever comes out. If you believe every note is fine, it's going to be good. Because our favorite artists, even if they play only 3 chords, they became the instrument. They're the light. They're a channel for what needs to come out. And that's why we are drawn into that light, right? And it doesn't matter how many chords they play. because the stuff they play, they own. They become that. That's the X factor, basically.
Yeah. It's it's kind of like at an early age, I tried to figure out why people liked different Beatles when they weren't together. You know what I mean? Like they're still the Beatles, just apart, but it was the personnel factor. I guess whatever, if the X is like Paul McCartney's sillier and I like sillier people, it's them being them through their mode of
Exactly.
expression. And like
Totally.
and like together it's great because you get all the flavors, but separate, it's equally as well as great as well if you want a sweet guy or a dark chocolate or
Right.
like I don't know what John Lennon would be, but like and I think that's really important to to be able to trust that within yourself, and that's why I think so great about like the effortless mastery, like the course now. But when I came across it was the book, and
Totally.
the one which is still a book. I mean, but like it was, I had the CD in the back, and like the one quote that I keep going back to is, Kenny put it in a way like there's a cosmic bank account. I'm probably going to say it wrong. A cosmic bank account, and like Miles Davis and John Coltrane, they all draw accounts from it, and we draw from that. And he said something along the lines of, I don't want to draw from their account, rather start my own. And like I think that's to find that, like how you've been expressing a sense of being okay with whatever comes out, and like
Right.
and it's got to be difficult. I find, or it's not got to be. I found it to be more difficult in like an academic setting, because like you have all these things that most people don't grade you on or care about or look at, now are being examined, and like maybe
Right.
and a lot of my peers came in knowing all this stuff, where I came from a background of going to bars. My dad would take me to bars as a kid. And I would sit in with the bands, right? So I was learning in the moment like that. But to come into like being a very structured, read off this, play off this, there was a much more impact if you played something wrong, or there was a much more like
Right.
attention
You know
to
what
it.
we call it right now? Recently, he came up with a new. It's called MSD, music school disease, because music school disease is when, as Kenny puts it, when something that feels good must be the wrong stuff, because you're taught every day that music is hard, because every day you need to do something that's complex, and at
Right.
some moment you think, oh, playing music is actually really complicated. It doesn't feel, yeah. So you don't believe in the stuff coming out easily, whereas that's proof of mastery, right? Making the complicated easy and feel good. You should never doubt something that comes out easily, because that's the right thing to do. And then the other thing he says is the chronic critique syndrome.
I love that.
Yes, because every day you hear you suck, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you played great, but how about bar 5? Or also they say, oh, you should be yourself, and then afterwards they still judge you because they're the teacher.
So
And that there's this dynamic,
yeah.
and you just weren't you yourself. And then it could be music, and not only Berkeley, it's every
Yeah.
school in its own way is it's because of accreditation. And we go at the end of the semester, you do a jury. Can talk about that, quite extensive. So that's basically the problem of going to music school.
Right. I mean, and
Sometimes. Right?
and it all comes from a good place. It's to better your thing, right? But like you're saying, so with your journey through kind of going in multi fields at the same time, which I really relate to. Like I really relate to that that kind of chaotic taking all in. But like was it easier to kind of let go of mistakes in a way and kind of accept where you are and grow on, because you were doing so many different things, and as well as studying kind of psychology? Because like I feel if you hyper focus on a thing or one direction, I must be this, there's no outcome other than me being whatever that is, those mistakes may hit a little harder.
I'm not sure. I think there's no one way to go. because you could have had a parent that's really destructive, right? Or a teacher or somebody that just talks you out of it. And then how many people go, they're adults and are like, oh, I used to play violin, but, I started hating it and then I quit. I wish I never quit. So many people have that. So I don't think doing multiple things and, betting on different, that doesn't, still you could be like really depressed about stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a guarantee for success. What what works for most people is just learning how to just stop and take a breath and see what's right for them, because there's no one way to deal with stuff. As you probably know, everybody is different, and we appreciate that. And that's the problem of especially creative schools, right? It's also dance and painting. We want them to be themselves, but how are you going to teach the people to be themselves? Because if you're going to say, oh, you should be yourself now, then they're going to be the picture they paint of their perfect self. So they lost themselves
along the way
for being right. So what you want to do is have them find a space or the moment or inner body, different, how to do music therapy on yourself. You could do music therapy when you perform at Carnegie Hall, because you're making a connection with yourself and that shines through into the audience, right? So yeah, I see it as one big picture.
Was it always kind of that big picture for you, or has that slowly become pieces?
I think over recent years, I've been just more able to verbalize it, but intuitively, I was never, I've been always like just going for stuff.
Yeah.
Right. That's just my personality. And I just don't, I don't really take no for an answer. So I really work hard. And I just like, I put my soul into it. I also am very like, I really want to help the world, right? Yeah. I hate it when people are like dishonest and mean and all that jazz. I cannot really deal with it. So yeah, there's a big sustainability message in what I do and what I love, and people should be nice. That's that's not Kenny. But that's me personally. I think this is because also growing up in Europe, jazz is seen as a classical music, almost. They say, we teach you how jazz is supposed to be like. But jazz historically was not grown to be like how this is how you do it, right? And I agree and even jazz, we should call it American music, right? Black American music now. Styles that would fall under jazz are created by so much history, and it's amazing to study that. But I could never be a copy of my teacher, who is a copy of, right? In the end, you're going to create all these layers of copies, and you lose the line of music. Yeah. So I saw this. Yeah, I think this is really one of the ways out to actually make a change in the world, because everybody's, stuck in Instagram and TikTok, and nobody's
all right.
How do you create innovation? Is through creativity and to people being themselves and just finding out and meeting them and each other. So yeah, that's my personal mission, I would say. I mean, with my latest album, that's what I'm doing too. I don't know if you checked it out.
Of course, yeah. No, like like trying to like kind of build into that, but to say what you just, it is very hard when everything, the self-expression is now a formulated device that we put it in. It has to hit an algorithm to reach an audience, whatever, and like, how can you stretch that rhythm, right? That's in one whatever time signature that is. And like, but also the kind of like, so slowly developing this like sense of self. It keeps me it brings up this Mary Oliver quote, who's a poet. And she had this, I'm going to mix it up a little bit, but it's around the idea of like, it was in a book about writing poetry or reading poetry. It's like freedom of expression comes to the diligent, patient, and not always practicing, like, or always going for it. The person that was always trying to achieve it, that's when it gets there, is for these people that are endlessly looking for that way to freedom, and like being there is a big part of it. So one thing I wanted to ask to jump into the new album with Polaroid, that's the album, right, that you used to help get you to Berkeley? Is that the one you're...
Yeah, that's Polaroid, the acapella.
Yeah. That's an incredible record. And like...
Thank you.
One thing, like listening to that and then listening to this new record, it's like that freedom, that sense of like what effortless mastery, like when I listen to some of Kenny's works and when I listen to like some like Coltrane artists who like live on that edge of like structureless structure, like I hear it in that record, and it's a Typuhthâng, right? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Typuhthâng. Which is a joke.
I love it though. I love it. Like,
it's a lot of things.
Well, yeah, sonically it's all over the place, which is so beautiful.
That explains the name.
And like, because I know when you initially, I think it was in 2020, you asked everyone to send you a note, right? Or you just asked for a bunch of
just one note.
Right. So when you get that, it was like what, 40 or 70 plus emails of a note?
Yep.
What was it, like a cappella, or was it like instruments?
It was any instruments, anybody, all different. Yeah, they just send me a random note, and some people were like, "Oh, which note?" Right? And I was like, "Yeah, any, as long even if some people send me a sample, as long as it's not longer than 5 seconds, that was cool." So yeah, I got a whole bunch of like random sounds.
Yeah. Did you? Was there like a pattern of like notes? You're like, oh man, I got a lot of B flats. You know what I mean? Or like,
it was pretty even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Strangely enough. Yeah. It was, I did get all of the different chromatics. So yeah, that's, I mean, obviously I could detune some of it if it was really necessary in a moment, but most of them was still the same note. Yeah. And then I think in the end, because that was sort of my test, could I mobilize all these people? And well, it started with the chocolate bar that we use. Right. This company, Original Beans, and they have this amazing project where they buy this bean to bar from this female cacao farmer collective. There are 1,500 women in Congo, and they get a living wage which is like 250% higher than fair trade. So it's really nice. Yeah. Finally they can grow the business, they can send the kids to school, and they empowered to just like do it over there. And I was inspired. So I was like, if we just buy their product for like the real price, we can just add it to the album. And then obviously on the album we need a bunch of women. So I just put out a request, hey, send me a note. And then it was a bunch of them. And I figured, okay, then this is possible. So in addition to these notes, I gathered a few arrangers to make sure that also there's like the songs I wrote would be arranged for different bands. So there's a big one girl made a big band, like a Cuban vibe big band arrangement, and there's a choir arrangement, and there's an orchestra. There's all these different songs, and in between I use these samples notes in addition with some sounds from Congo that I got from this BBC radio journalist. She was there in 2016, and she sent me all her sounds, like 8 gigabytes of sounds.
Oh, wow.
All these interviews, and I had to sift through and just listen to everything. And you hear the birds, but you hear them talk about in Swahili, and then there's translations about, you hear what they actually saying. Because I don't speak that language, but but there was translations as well. You hear the motorcycle in the water, you hear them digging in the ground, and there's all these sounds. So I've been chopping all little bits, and there's even pygmy singing. So yeah, for these soundscapes, I ended up with like 110 layers in my Logic file.
Oh man.
Logic, I use Logic for my music creation, the digital part of it. So there's 110 layers of like all these little bits, right? And all. So that was like it was like a big Sudoku puzzle, just making them run. And yeah, I did, because where do you start, right?
Right.
If you line them up all at once, it's like, and my computer crashed. I mean, that was too much on one. But eventually I got it, and so I just started randomly moving stuff out in time. So. And then these soundscapes came to, but there was a lot of randomness because you have to start somewhere.
Right. And like through that randomness, is that like, and did you add them to the compositions, or these are because I definitely hear the tracks in between where it's like
yes.
Okay. And like, but they blend so good. They blend so well. Let me use better words. They blend so well into the tracks and the other compositions that like,
yes.
So another question I had with that. So you wrote these tunes. Did you write them and like record them as just kind of like a straight ahead, like, chord singing, and then send them to these women to make different compositions of them? Or was it like a kind of a full arrangement already and then they kind of rearranged it?
Well, many of these songs I've been playing with a quartet or just by myself as a songwriter, or some of them I was playing even years ago with my loop station. So pretty much all the songs were, had some live recording of some sort. So I could give my arranger that. And obviously a lead sheet with the chords and the melody and I think even text. I always give them the lyrics because that's nice.
Yeah.
So they had an idea of the song, and then I just let them sit with it, and I would ask them what they would think they would want to do. So, for example, my friend Marielle Roberts, who's a cellist, and she does a lot of experimental, like bizarre, like cellos are scared of her, and I told her, hey, you could do with this song whatever you want. She's like, are you sure? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, go wild. And she created this song that's like, and on top of that, and I mean, it's a beautiful string quartet, but she wrote that all down on sheet music. So I got back a score with all these bleeps and bloops and a lot of like accents and experimental techniques for strings. And then I sent it out to all the players and they sent it back to me. And then I had all these, I had the parts together and I was like, I still have no clue what happened, but it's cool. So then I looked back at her score and I compared it with my lead sheet and I was like, oh, so if my intro was like 4 bars, then let's try it out. So I started 4 bars in.
Yeah.
And I sing my song and it fits perfectly. But as you hear in the recording, that song is the most experimental of them all. And it's just a conglomerate of like, right?
Yeah.
And then my song lays on top of it and it flows. The melody is really like, it holds it together in a way. And then, for example, for the choir, I used to do that on my own with loops. And then my friend, I sent her that little video of me doing it years ago. And my friend Linnea from Sweden took it and she arranged it for loops, looping like a real choir, like a 26-piece group from all over the world.
Yeah.
And
what song was that one?
That's the first one, Just Go.
Okay. Yeah. And then
I put the birds into it as well. The jungle birds in the beginning. So yes, there's some sounds that are mixed into the original to the arrangements of the songs.
Okay, because I was like at that very first track, I was like, oh, because when I was that's the first one I heard. Well, duh, it's the first one. But like before reaching out to you, and I was like, whoa, this is the space this creates, like, and that. So okay, that's what made me really think all these sounds and notes are composed throughout the whole
Right.
whole everything. So with that experimental one, was that Touch My Hand? Was that the one with? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Because like, listen, I've gone back and listened to that one like a handful of times. I guess pun intended. But like just the like that. I don't even know what the experimental ness to it. And
Yeah, so much tension, but then you need tension to release, right?
But it really the melody fits so beautifully, and like the song,
Right.
like it works so well. So like that's and like kind of comparing like Polaroid to that, it was like a huge jump, like
Yeah.
with the effortlessness and the freeness kind of mentality, and like. And I
Right.
imagine a lot of that was probably in your playing right after, or even probably during the recording.
Because guess what? I wrote that melody probably in 2008
Wow.
or so. It's been just laying around for years. And it was just never recorded for, the way you touched my hand. So yeah, that was an old song that I didn't really perform a lot because it's an intense melody. And also, I mean, there was a lot of chords in my lead sheet, so she had a lot to work with as well. But yeah, she took it to a whole different.
It's
like,
so cool.
It's like my song on Mars. Kenny Werner has this vinyl that's called "Church on Mars," and he's like, "Yeah, I want to write jazz in an elevator on Mars," right? So. That's basically it. If there's one thing that holds it together, then you can still make a connection. Because I think if you say, "Oh, jazz," and a lot of people are scared and that it's a little complex, or they I don't know. But this album it's pop, but it's also songwriter, and there's a big band, there's this choir and an orchestra. It just draws from a lot of things, and but I think the voice and the melodies are pretty catchy. Some of them are even like earworms.
Yeah,
and
I'll agree to that.
They're stuck in my head sometimes, which is, it's good and bad. But yeah, so I think that holds it together. And maybe even, my voice or the vibe of my voice or even a message. It's still, even though all these songs are very different, they are still, they still make it. I think also it was a conscious decision to make sure that it's an album and not just 12 singles, because then it's more of an experience. And I think that's what I learned doing these edible pastry paintings with music. We're throwing chocolate and cake and cream, and then everybody's watching, and every movement Teddy makes while throwing chocolate, as he's a pastry chef, so it's up to him. But everything flying makes a sound, so improvised soundscapes. And we found out people just watching that, it's an experience, and then they get to eat it, obviously. So music should become an experience. It's just so easy to just download it on YouTube or on. It's for free everywhere, but then you just don't really. I don't know. You remember buying a record, and then there's a booklet, and you read it, and there's maybe even a poster, and you put it on your right. It's an experience. You got your first. I remember when I bought my first record.
What was it?
An experience. I think it was maybe it was the first one was Norah Jones.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't know why. Yeah. Or it's been Alicia Keys. I'm not sure. Maybe that must have been in the same year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. But you're. Yeah.
But I remember, and my parents had vinyl, so my first memory of vinyl was Dave Brubeck.
Wow.
Because they just had that laying around. So I told my piano teacher, like, I also want to do, whatever you call jazz. And my teacher was like, "Oh shit." He was really into Bach. He loves classical. So, but he was accommodating. I was lucky with my piano teacher as a kid. And my parents were very aware of it, that it should be fun. So they changed me a couple of teachers. When they finally found a nice teacher for me, I stick.
So did you start
Yeah,
with piano or did you start singing?
I was always banging and on the piano and singing as a kid. It was just natural. I was making up songs as just banging and like,
Yeah.
Mom, I wrote a song. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Right. I mean, 5-year-old probably. I mean, I still remember the song.
Yeah. What is it?
It was in Dutch. It was like 2 lines about the clouds, that the clouds could be all shapes.
Yeah.
But then in Dutch.
That's awesome.
It was cute. And I think I wrote it down because I learned how to write notes and I was inspired, but my teacher at that time couldn't deal with it. Or they just want to finish book 1 and then Little Fingers book 2. So my parents changed me to a different teacher. And then, eventually, I found an amazing teacher when I was probably 8 or so. But my parents were aware of it. Like, it should be fun.
And well, that's
and informative, right?
Right. Well, and that's that whole kind of self-reflection. Like, I'm okay with wanting to do better because I'm okay with who I am, and like that's such a strong like mental place to be. And like I kind of like through reading works like Effortless Mastery and just like working on my own music. And I think when you write your own music and record it, you get really in this head of like, especially singing. Like, because you only have one voice. You only have one place to start. You either like embrace it or you don't. And like because I started with guitar and I was like trying to learn how to sing, and it was such a like icky alien feeling. Like I wasn't just like good at it. I had to work really hard to be able to make some notes. But through that, I accepted where I am. It was just kind of like, this is how we start. And it's almost like with a lot of like, effortless mastery like ideas, it's kind of like in that, like, this is where you are the best you can be, and you move on from that. And like I think because the voice, you're just stuck with it, and so whatever you got is a really like almost kind of like jump start for that type of thinking. And like that's cool that your family was just like, this is what you got to be doing. So like
they did not make it a big deal at all, which is nice. Well, also, for example, when you're talking, you're not thinking, how do I sound?
Right. Yeah.
Right? And then you get singing lessons and they tell you about this thing called bridge or a break between your registers. And and I don't agree with any of that.
Yeah.
I could, there's vocal cords, right?
Right.
And they just wiggle.
Yeah.
It's not square. Right? There's no break. It's in your mind. It's like, ooh. And of course, there's a falsetto sound that you could create, and there's like a more of a chest voice, and of course, but I would never call it break or bridge, because that's never going to help me make anything that, if you ask a 5-year-old to just do, they'll do it. Yeah. There's no break, right?
Yeah.
They just like, or if you ask a 2-year-old to just sit at the drums or the piano, they're like, ooh.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. They're not like, how do I sound? How am I doing? No, they're just like, yeah, chocolate cake. That's Kenny's vibe. He's like, it should be so enjoyable to just make music. And then by going to music school, obviously we get in our mind and we make it romantic, where it is just muscle skill, motoric memory, or motoric skill. Name. It's the other way. You get it. Right?
Yeah.
It's your body doing it.
Yeah.
And you can romanticize. Yeah, cool. But that doesn't, oftentimes it gets only in the way, right? What's the scary moments if you're writing a song, the empty page? So write something bad.
Right. Just keep doing
but
it.
Actually, your ego doesn't allow you to write something bad because you still want to write something good. It's really hard to get rid of that. You should check out a book. I think it came out recently. Rick Rubin.
Oh yeah. I saw.
Yeah,
I
The
haven't.
Creative Act.
Yeah, have you read that yet?
They're all, yeah, we
Okay.
just finished it last week. All little nuggets.
Okay.
And I do a lot of audiobooks because I'm traveling so much. So, yeah, the audiobook is great. It's him reading it. So
Oh,
it's double fun. He has his dark,
Yeah.
deep voice. So, yeah, kudos for Rick Rubin, too. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely will have to check that out. I listened to an interview about it, and like being aware of who he was and like trying to find it the next day, but it wasn't out for months or something after that interview, which was weird.
Okay.
So it's been in the back burner, but like I definitely it's interesting, like with the whole idea of voice break and stuff like that, because like even if there is a break, there's people that totally immerse in that, like who would be like a Dave Matthews, right? Like there's a break, but
Yeah.
people love it. You know what I mean? Like, or just that idea of whatever it is, working with it and making it your thing to this expression.
There you go.
And
there's no right way. It's just your way.
Right.
To play the instrument.
I guess kind of going back to what we talked about before, breathing is already kind of like a exercise for singing. Like it's talking with breathing.
Guess what? You're breathing all day. Kenny would say that. He's going to say that to you sometime.
I know. I'm excited.
Guess what? I know you're breathing. Ha ha ha. He says that. It's funny. And he's right. We're already breathing. Yeah. We should not make it a bigger deal than that. Well, if you blow up a balloon, right, and you just open the tip, it's going to be like, right? So there's something to say for breath support. You want to take air, but you want to make sure that you're not like a balloon when you sing.
Right.
You just want to even out being able to just hold your breath and spread it out a little evenly. That's like muscle memory.
Right.
It's practicing your muscles to stay in place so you can have an open posture and use your breath to the best. But that's not like, oh, I need to breathe more and then just your shoulders go up. That's not breathing. Right?
Right.
And it happens a lot. And you tell your choir, take a breath. And they all go like, ooh. And that's not chill. But it just, it's human, right? We're all the same. We're all hampered by our thoughts and expectations, and society is trying to even like make us stick with it.
Right. Well, I definitely agree with that statement because, like when I reached out to you in the email, I work with a lot of kids that are terrified to not master something they've never done before right away. Like they approach it, they play it, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't play it perfectly because I've never touched a banjo in my life. How come I cannot do this? I'm out." And like, and you know what I mean? Like we can see that as absurd, right. But in their minds, like so much of everything's documented, and failure is almost like traumatized in a way because people.
You need to do well.
Right. Well, and just like internet culture is like epic fail. You know what I mean? Like we focus more on like how we can like belittle someone's attempt than appreciate their attempt. Right. And like that's what I think so like reading both Kenny's books and diving into your works and just like listening to your interviews and his interviews, like it's such an important mindset to be able to have is to love this failure because this failure is the yin and yang of you. And like,
right. It's just exploring all the options. That's your duty. Rick Rubin is saying that.
Yeah.
You're part of your duty as an artist is explore all the possibilities. And then you find out some of them work and some of them don't work. And if you find out stuff, if something doesn't work, at least you try it. And then if you define success as, that's what Kenny's saying. But, Lao Tse-tung, you saying the road is the way. You've heard that.
Yeah.
If you define success as taking the action instead of the result, then you take more action. Statistically, if you take more action, there's more success.
Right.
Right? The only failure is if you never make the call and you just regret never doing it. They did. I mean, I learned that in my first year of psychology, there was this study on like nurses did a study on people on their deathbed. They were like, they questioned them about their life. And the main question was like, oh, what would you have done or what would you change, right? What do you regret? And most of the statistically, most people regret not doing something.
Wow.
I wish I had done XYZ, right?
Yeah.
And not a lot of people said, oh, I really regret that I took action. I really went for it and it failed. No, they just, because in a way, if you do something with your heart, because that's the right thing in that moment, and that's what you believe in, then finding out it doesn't work is great. Also, that's a success, because then at least you can just change gears and find something that might work, something else. So yeah, that will open up possibilities, because you could be stuck in a system that's never going to change.
Yeah.
Because you're scared to leave, or you're right. Yeah. Being close to yourself. I always found that, being close to what you love and what you want to do, that's important. It takes a little courage.
Of course. Yeah. You got to believe in who's gonna take the trip, or who's gonna attempt to try that note on stage, or who's gonna stick the landing. Like,
right.
Before you jump, you gotta, there's definitely.
Yeah. Well, it's even about silly stuff, right? Getting a gig,
right?
Or shall I do? Yeah.
And
I take a lot of risk. I don't really care. My biggest issue is, where do I get all the time? I need more time. Or find somebody to help me out with some work. And, that's hard.
I definitely agree with that. Oh man, if somebody can help me send emails or book things, that would be amazing. Yeah. But I guess that's part of it's finding your creative approach within that,
That's the journey too.
Yeah. But and that's that's part of the risk too, is getting the rejection of no gig or whatever it may be. But it's so important to be okay to move on from that, though, and that's why I think where people get really, really hung up, which is such a bummer, because that study I haven't heard of that, but that's super impactful, because it is a lot. We spend a lot of times places and where we're comfortable, where it doesn't. And I guess having this kind of outlet, right, being blessed that music is a driving thing, you kind of or any creative endeavor, if it's baking, right? Finding these ways to be creative with it is already kind of a factor that you slowly start to take these risks and get used to it, even if you're not training that muscle.
But kids already do it. Right? They're fearless. They're just piano, this is cool. Any new experience, oftentimes, unless the parents are really, right? But generally, a kid is open to experience.
I definitely agree with
that. We lose it because we're taught to be careful. We taught to be, right, that's the word, carefulness. And we have to have respect in some way, but having respect could mean a lot. You can still have respect and just be yourself.
Right. Yeah. That, and to kind of touch base on private practice, you said you were working in a charter school. I get a little more flexibility, right? So I get to stretch the barriers of how I teach music to kids, which has made it.
Totally.
It made it so much more possible to completely flip the script and be it's not quarter notes today, but rather it's we're doing Dungeons and Dragons, but we're going to play music, or whatever it may be, which is really fun on my end to find a way that makes it click with these kids. But and it's a risk within itself, because you think you nail it, oh, they're going to love it, and then nope, no one cares today. But it's that.
And you switch gears. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And a lot of kids are this is kind of fun. This is different than before. I like that, And I do agree with what you're saying. A lot of kids they'll jump into it and just wail and have that freedom. And it's weird. We unlearn that to relearn that. Like, and that's, I guess, the muscle memory of it. One thing I wanted to, we were talking about, is it, you guys call it cocoa jazz, right?
Yeah, well, we call it for fool now.
Okay.
But it started as a joke, chocolate jazz, right? Choco jazz.
Oh,
but then we changed its name because it's not only chocolate, it's also cake and flowers, edible, like it's dessert. Yeah. And it's not only jazz because I use electronics too, and loop station and synthesizer. So it's a soundscape. So yeah, we call it vervoel, which is a non-existent Dutch word. It's a blend of two Dutch words. In Dutch, it's gevoel and vervulling, and that will be fulfillment and feeling merged into each other, and that creates for a non-existent. You still get it? It's very confusing. Vervoel.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's an immersive, experimental dessert music experience.
But I love how like you play with words like this. Is like, I guess kind of another thing to touch upon, like not having time, like writing, like setting aside time to be in that space to write music or write lyrics. Like I try really hard to allot myself a couple hours, a couple days a week where I have like 40 minutes or an hour just to
Beautiful.
write. But it doesn't always work out like that. So I can't imagine someone like with your schedule that's easy at all. Like,
you see all these Post-it notes there.
I said, okay, yeah. Is that part of your process? Is kind of playing with words like that? And
so this week we started to put we started to put Post-it notes to just find out all the stuff I'm currently working on to create a little more structure, because it was just a little overwhelming last week. But
that's playing with
words. Well, you know, English is not my first language. I mean, so yeah, I still think in Dutch, but I also think in English by now. So yeah, playing around with different permutations of stuff, I would say yes. Yeah. It's like making a soup.
Right.
Putting all this stuff in and then just seeing what comes from it. And I would say with lyrics that oftentimes happens as well. That said, sometimes I have a story and a message, and then there is lyrics that are more like a story.
Right.
So there's the songs you write in the shower, and there's the songs you write by just like mixing up ingredients. But both exist. In my case, it comes with flows. So some periods I write a lot, and some periods I really have to sit myself down, because there's just so many deadlines for, concerts or tours or teaching. There's just a lot.
Yeah. Okay, because I'd imagine like I talked with Victor a little bit, and like Victor Wooten, he has this whole like thing with wordplay and like tearing apart words and finding meanings within the words. And then after that, I found myself doing that all the time, where I'd be like bringing stuff up, maybe like not like I'd bring it up to other teachers, like as we're like doing like student like staff days, and like, well, like the word belonging is somewhere you want to be for a long time, and they're like, are you sleeping or what? Like they get weirded out. But in my mind, I'm like, that's so much cooler to think of the word that way, So I got to imagine like speaking multiple languages, and that's like to be able to
I guess so.
That's really poetic. That's so cool.
I'm still learning new words. I think that's statistically, you could, I read. Let's just, I can Google that. How many new words?
Oh, it's got to be
per day language learning.
It's got to be it's got to be a fair amount. Like,
generally, just being exposed to the world, you learn 5 to 10 new words a day.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So times
just that. Not by studying, right? But just being exposed to, you at least hear about, or maybe sometimes you don't even notice. But
That's so cool though. Like, because when you tear apart things or add things like that, like it kind of like, especially with writing, the weight's on the word in a way, like, or the lack of weight that should be on the word. Like if it's in a song and it has to
Mm-hmm.
hit a syllable to turn the thing, like that. At least the focus, maybe that's the right way to put it. The focus on it. Like it gives you like a whole, and I think it shows in all your work a different approach to these words. Like
I
and
guess
like
so.
one I really liked and like was bebop and a breakfast or breakfast and bebop. I love the alliteration of that. You know what I mean? I was like that
Did
like
you get Bebop was the name of my hamster when I was in college?
no way.
Well, the story about Bebop, I at that time it must have been like 2006 or so. I was in the university, so in Leiden, and I mean, and I would go to the conservatory as well. But I think I was writing, and then I had this boyfriend, and he's like, but I was like, I really wanted a pet,
Right.
so it's like, well, if you get a hamster, you never need me in again. So yeah, no, for obvious reasons, for other reasons,
Yeah.
we broke up, which was all good, but it was just me and Bebop, the jazz hamster, and he loved jazz. Every time I put on like Ella, he'd just run. So basically, I was left having breakfast not with my ex, but with Bebop the hamster. That was how it started. And that arrangement later on, because so I just wrote the lyrics. I think, and at some point I met this producer from Australia, and he's like, okay, let's just. He was like camping out in Leiden for a couple of months, and I think I don't know how it went, but at some point he was just staying in my place on an air mattress, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna create an a cappella album where he would just go like, okay, sing me a lyric, sing me a trombone part, sing me a bass part. And I did not write all of Polaroid. I did not write any note down.
Okay.
I mean, oftentimes there was a melody and the lyrics and some chords, but I did not do arrangements. It was all vocally semi-improvised on the spot.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
oh, sing me some oohs and some ahs. And that's how the whole album came together. And it was very spontaneous and very fun to create. And he was great with Logic. Back in the day, I did not have a Mac, and he had all the gear and a nice microphone. And so we created that in a couple of weeks, I think. I mean, like really intensely.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you hire, you go to a studio for 1 day or 2 days, and that's how you create an album. But we were just like, we put so much time in, like just recording layers and layers. Some of these songs on Polaroid are like 45 layers.
They sound like it. Like it sounds so dense. Like
it was just so fun to make. Maybe if I had written out like a choir, an official choir situation, it was probably different. But yeah, this came together so organically and so fun. But if you compare that with like 11 years, no, that was 2011. It came out in March 2012. So, and this new album came out just now. So that's quite a while. But if you compare them, I put a lot of work in it too. Getting all the parts and creating this. Yeah. So in a way, that is similar, I would say. My voice it sounds different to me, at least. I think my voice now has grown up a little bit. Obviously, I'm 10 years older than 10 years ago. So obviously, and then, yeah, so there is difference, but I think it's the same, in a way, the same vibe.
Yeah, well, now that you like explain how it was made, it's almost, instead of like doing that with your own voice in the building up those harmonies and parts and movements, you brought in other people. And I think that really it really brings that freeness and that expression to your voice that was there in the other one, but just in a more like I don't want to say heavier tone, but like more like free kind of implies like flowing, but I mean like known, like this is me tone, like self-actualized. That's where I'm looking for.
Yes.
And like That's cool. Like, cause I went back and forth between the two of those like a bunch of times getting ready to talk with you. And like,
the first album is not on iTunes or Spotify. The first album was in 2009 and it was sold a bunch of times, but just in physical. I did put it on Bandcamp though. Oh, okay. It's called Roof Garden. And that was with quintet. Like it's like Nora Jones vibe, Deanna Kroll. It's like a little band. And yeah, I really like those songs. But yeah, after them Polaroid with all the voices, I was like, oh, how do I do this? So I got it just came out, the first iPad with a loop station app. So I went wild on iPad apps and just combining the apps, and I could loop my voice and found ways to actually perform Polaroid because that was an issue.
Right.
And then I went to Berkeley. So yeah, after Berkeley, I moved to New York, though continuing my work with Kenny. And it was like, oh, I need to just do everything that's here because New York is amazing.
Whoa, yeah.
And so overwhelming. So I've been gigging and teaching, and for I just, and then COVID hit, and it was like, oh, it's time for my new album because it was never time because I was just running around. I played with Kenny in the Blue Note and with all these famous people. It's been such a journey.
Yeah,
I was with Chris Potter with Dave Liebman. I played Peter Erskine. All these people. It's proximity, right? I'm in that bubble and I work hard.
Did you? Sorry, not like clearly because you can't handle all that unless you do. Did you find that kind of like because being with these bigger names and like the people that are kind of in the scene, especially just jumping in and trying to fit in and like, did you find like this kind of idea of just taking the breath and just being you, like made it easier to fit into all this without collapsing kind of on?
Well, obviously, Kenny gets to be there, right? And in the beginning, I told a friend, oh, I'm so honored to play with Kenny and in the Blue Note and with Chris. There was all this, like, it was a band, like, oh my God. My first gig, when I graduated, the first gig was a week in the Blue Note with Kenny. And so it was Kenny and Chris Potter, Ambrose, a commisery. I don't know if you're really into jazz, but, and then Patatucci on bass, and it was Marcus Gilmore on drums. So, like, oh my God, the band. And then in the audience was Antonio Sanchez and Lee Konitz and like obviously journalist type of people. Yeah. And it was like, oh, I'm so honored. I told my friend, and my friend said, don't ever say that again. It's cool to be honored, but they ask you for a reason. If they were surgeons, like, oh, you could just join for the fun of it. Here's like a knife. Yeah, you cut the heart open. No, they're never going to do it, right? They're pros. This is their business. So I realized that they only would ask me if they found that I professionally and, sound wise added something to it. And that first, then, I had to jump on stage, right? Because there's no escape. And, with Kenny it's always like there's a lot of improv going on, and there's always, I would sing like a trumpet type of score, so it was always like a lot of complex melodies. And at some point, I realized he's looking at me, and I'm like, oh, that's my solo. But you only have a second, right? Because it's the new head and you're on. And I'm like, but, me right now. So I had that microsecond of like, oh. So I remember closing my eyes and just like trust it. So I opened my mouth and stuff came out, and the audience started like cheering like I was a rock guitar player. Like, yeah. Which was bizarre. I had an outer body experience. I have no clue what I did, but they loved it. And I know that. And that's trust in my voice, because I know I can sing high, I know I can sing low, and I know there's stuff I cannot do yet, and I love to learn. And by now, when I open my mouth, there's sound. It's like I'm talking.
Yeah.
I'm never thinking, oh, how do I sound when I talk? With singing, I don't do that. I never really did that, but I learned more.
That's so inspiring, though, is to get to that point of letting go. And it's so crazy that it's 100% those moments when you do.
Right.
But it's also the pressure of being in a room with that, like those cats like that, and
yeah. And then he always puts me a lot of pressure. He would then a couple of years later or so, it is like, oh, tomorrow you're gonna sing one, right? And I'm like, okay, tomorrow, which song? He would just give me like a super small window to learn something very complete. He knows I can dig it, but it's like, oh, thank you. It would have been nice to get like at least a week or something, but no, tomorrow you're on. Or even like we played in January for a whole week for two Steelmans at I think it was 5 nights at Lincoln Center. This is Jazz Club.
Yeah.
And that was Antonio Sanchez and Anat Cohen and Scott Colley on bass. And I'm spacing out the guitar player. Chico Pinheiro. Okay. And on harmonica was Grégoire Marais. So I would sing a Toot Steelman song, which is like one of these standards that they love. I would sing Wonderful World or Smile or any of these songs. And so on day 3 or 4, he goes like, just a second before the set. Oh, so today you won't sing What a Wonderful World, you'll sing Smile. And we'll do it in C. Or whatever he said. Sweet. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, that's so cool. That's so good by now.
Yeah.
Right. That even the conceptualized stuff comes out. Well, if I don't know anything, then I cannot do it, right? If I don't know the lyrics, there's no way I can just make up lyrics. There's stuff you know and there's stuff you don't know, obviously. Right. But he always puts me on the spot like that.
Well, that's the first test, right? Are you willing to play?
I guess so. Yeah. It's not, I don't think it's conscious though. It's just like, oh, right. If I say, hey, do you want some chocolate cake? You say, yeah. It's the same. Yeah. It's the same vibe.
And it should be. And it should, like you're saying, it should be as I get dessert. This is awesome. You know what I mean? Like,
right. It's playing music.
Yeah.
Not working. And, obviously I'd love to do more gigs and, grow my audience, all that like stuff. Of course, that's the journey. Kenny has the same. Kenny still thinks he needs to grow more fame and he deserves that. So I help him with the digital components of that, obviously. But yeah, it's a process. It's a journey. But as long as you sound like you, there is an audience. It doesn't matter what your level is.
And it's like people love Paul McCartney because he's Paul McCartney, not because of like we can all play an A flat, you know what I mean, or singing but it's because of who it is. And on a side tangent, me and my drummer have been going through. You do a really good job with the Instagram stuff with Kenny, like sending those back and forth, which has been really cool. Because those are awesome. You're getting the bit and the think nugget. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
But another kind of, I wanted to go back when you were working with like a looper. Did you do stuff with a theremin? Did I read that right?
Well, you could have heard of theremin, but I have a theremin app, and it's inside an app you should totally get, and all your students should get it. It's called Thumb Jam.
Thumb Jam?
It's the best app. Maybe you pay like, I don't know, $10, $20 for the app.
Okay.
Totally worth it. You could put this Thumb Jam. There's many sounds in it and they're pretty real. It's a really nice catalog. It's all in the box. Okay. And it's app on your phone or in your iPad. I don't think it's for computer, but yeah. And then you can choose all the keys or all the tonalities. You can even have like velocity, and you can do pitch bend. So with your thumb, you can just like, and you can wiggle it, and then it gets you to vibrato. So if you have a violin app on Thumb Jam, then yeah, I'm so nerd about that. But yes, you can wiggle, and then it's real violin, because that makes a violin, right? The vibrato, or like the velocity of her. That's the word, right? Velocity. Yeah. So yes, theremin, but no, I don't have that cool one. I have a friend who has the Moog theremin. That's a toy.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I think it's you need to find out how to actually do it. But yeah, I just have the app.
Okay. That's awesome, because those are crazy instruments.
Yeah, check the Thumb Jam app.
Thumb Jam for sure. Okay. That's awesome.
Your students kind of love it. It has all the instruments.
Well, well, that's the thing. The fun things like that, slide whistles, the things that are the goofiest, like also, I guess, saying out loud, they have no like social kind of expertise, like picture, like there's not like a professional slide whistler that we compare ourselves to, maybe.
Right. It's a toy.
Right. And that.
Yeah. But the piano is a toy.
It is. And it's
right.
Thinking of it.
And it's got. Well, the thinking of it like that makes it sound better, because you get a better chance of actually getting somewhere.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Because maybe your fingers play better than your mind.
Yeah.
Your mind is smarter than it. That's what Kenny says. My mind is smarter than me, but my hands play better than me.
Well, that's true. Like, how often are you like thinking, I guess, like, I mean, with singing, you kind of think of it as you go, but how often are you just kind of feeling where that note lands? Like, I guess like with like singing fills and stuff, like you practice kind of patterns, right? Like, or learn kind of patterns. But like when it comes to actually doing it, like, do you think about those? Like,
you better not. No, because you want only on stage. You only want to do what comes out by itself. How often you're working on a lick, whatever lick you have, and then you go on stage and in the middle of your solo, what was that lick? Your mind goes off, right?
Yeah.
That's when you lose the space and the groove. So yeah, we could say, oh, don't do that, but it just doesn't help to just say, oh, now I'm never gonna have expectation. It doesn't work like that. It becomes a practice.
Yeah.
Of just Kenny's been practicing like when I met him 2014, he was playing things in 9, like da 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 da, right, for probably 2 years. So whatever standard he would find, and then the 5 minutes before the students filled up the room, right? Every 5 minutes before class started, he was just there doing 9.
Yeah.
So he's just carving a path.
Right.
And he would never play his original in 9 until it plays itself.
Right.
Right? Until he can watch Netflix and have his hands do it. Right? You can make a phone call with your grandma, eat a sandwich, and do your taxes at the same time. There's many things you could do that just happen. And you would not spill all over to yourself. Right?
Right. Well, it's true, because you got
having your mind with all these opinions out of the equation, your hands might actually play better. And if they don't, then you finally celebrate, because you have something to study. And that's then the 4th step of effortless mastery, how to get something new into your system so that you can not only do it, but that it does it itself.
Right. Yeah. When you met Kenny, did you kind of like start doing this method for yourself, or just continue kind of doing your thing and found the overlap just by proximity?
Well, by now I get like people that really want to learn about the steps. So that's the specific steps. But this morning I had a guy who really wants to know piano. So we worked on big band voicings and how to do like jazz piano things. And then I have students that really want to, there's this classical singer and she wants to use the effortless mastery techniques to help her with her range. So it's a mixture of my former vocal techniques sessions blending in with the need to let go of sounding good. And this, she gets that.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's generally, I work with what the people actually need.
Yeah.
And sometimes if that means singing just one note from that space and just like, they get it. Sometimes that's what they need to learn, not like page 5 and book 2 of Little Fingers. No. I mean, I don't teach a lot of kids anymore. It's at all actually. No kids. Just my Berkeley kids.
Well, yeah, they probably wouldn't be.
They're a little older than. Yeah, I think they're older than your kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of them are probably right around the senior high kids. You're probably getting some kids that go straight from high school to there, and like.
Yeah, probably. I think they're all around 18.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, I have older students too, but and then privately it's just a lot of adults, professionals.
But that's what makes you a good teacher, is being able to figure out what they need and how on one aspect of a thing you can enhance that so it trickles into everything else. And like that's such an important thing, as anyone teaches anything or anyone who's trying to aid anyone in anything, to know that like though you went through the cookbook and you followed all the steps doesn't mean the person here needs to know that there is a book. You know what I mean? Right? They may just need to have a direction,
right? And
like they'll find that book themselves, But Vivienne, thank you so much for chatting with me. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
I mean, I know we went.
It was fun.
We went over the time I think I pitched in the initial thing, and I really appreciate it because
you kind of chopped the recording up, or you're just good.
I'll chop out when I kicked my mic moving around or when my cat was hopping around, but other than that, that's like being able to celebrate someone else is part of that whole thing. And like one thing because I reread everything to get ready to talk to both of you guys. The idea of going to a concert and not having that ego be like, how come you're not doing the show? Why are you at a show? You should be doing, you know what I mean? Being able to celebrate, like I guess as a teacher, you get used to doing that a lot. You're like, dude, you did it. You played the thing.
Yeah.
You kind of live for those moments, and you live.
Did you saw the video we posted about that listening? You don't want to listen. You're hearing everything, but you don't want to listen. There's this Instagram reel we posted a couple of weeks. It went like a hit. Everybody's sharing it. But he's right. How often are you so in your head? You're just listening to music and you're like, oh, what are they doing? And you're just self-identify. Oh, I should blah, 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 blah. You go off and you're not even enjoying the moment.
Right. Right.
And that's another music school disease, right? We get it all up into our. We don't even feel the moment. So try it out. Put some music on and then listen to it. Well, hear it because you're in the same room, but don't listen to it. That's an effortless mastery exercise. Yeah. You have to get into the moment. And then make your own sound. Hear it, but don't listen to it, because you don't want to be careful or influenced by whatever comes out. You want to see that if you're staying out of the way, if your body does it, how do you sound if you're not holding back?
Right. Wow.
And actually, that's your voice, the voice that you're using when you talk.
Right.
Because you're not managing that. So if there's vocal teachers out there, they all say, oh, you should like sing how you talk. That's the real truth.
Yeah.
Right. But then everybody's like, oh, I'm going to talk my line and then I'm going to sing my line, right?
Yeah.
That's not exactly what you might want to do. But the thinking aspect of how do I sound happens when you sing, and it rarely happens when you talk. So connecting these dots will create for a voice in music that's free.
That's so true, because like even just hearing, like I think, well, when you hear Bob Dylan sing, that's a great, everyone goes to that example. Like when he sings and he talks, he still sounds like that cadence. And even like with are you familiar with NMT, neurologic music therapy?
No.
Okay, NMT is like a really specific branch of music therapy where it's like it's all clinically based and like evidence based. And like they have, I think it's 10 techniques, one of which is forgetting the name of it, but it's like where people who have strokes learn to talk again through singing, because okay, yeah. So one side of your brain is where you process singing, the other talking.
Right. And they're tickling each other, right?
Right. So through singing, you can relearn the talk, but what about the opposite, which is what you got me thinking about right now? So like, gosh, what's the name of that? Mnemonic. It'll come back to me. I'll come back to the actual like NMT term for it. But like, because it is right. Our cadence should match it, and when you don't, like, that's why people celebrate the Bob Dylans and the Iggy Pops of the world that sound like that, whatever it is, like, because that's them. That's so cool. Oh, that's awesome. But wow, that's Vivienne. That's so. Thank you so much for like.
You're welcome.
This is like, is this kind of like what classes go like a little bit, like
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.